Hi, welcome back to Chess for Sleep, the channel where you can get your daily dose of chess while you're, drifting off to sleep, or maybe getting some R&R in, maybe just chilling on the bus to work. If you're looking for some low-key chess commentary, this is the place to get it. So, today we ask the question, is Pragg the next Magnus? And now that's something that we really can't come close to answering yet. Not only, Magnus has had an incredible run, and it's been the longevity of his run that's really astounding. The fact that he's been number one for so long, he was world champion for so long, above the 2800 for so long. Maybe we'll never see it again. I suspect eventually we will, but Pragg at 18 is trying to win the candidates tournament in April. And if Pragg does that, it is going to put the chess world on notice that maybe we are going to see, that next great prodigy that rises to number one in the world and goes on a dominant run. So, maybe Pragg winning the world championship, maybe that would pull Magnus back in to the world championship cycle, just because, I don't know, maybe defend his legacy if Pragg is quickly rewriting the history books. So, if we're trying to assess if Pragg is the next Magnus, then I think we have to look at a game between Pragg and Magnus. So these two played in the 2022 Airthings Masters. Now they played rapid, to be fair, 15-minute time control, and Pragg had black. You'll see, I think this was his chess.com rapid rating. Either way, this 1927 does not reflect the strength of Pragg. It does not bespeak his status as a 2700 classical player, which he now is. But it was 2 years ago, but he was already extremely strong. I think he was 2600s FIDE when this game happened. So let's get into the chess. So Magnus with white. Magnus kicked off with d4, and Pragg goes knight f6, c4 from Magnus, fighting a Nimzo. And it's looking like maybe we'll get a Nimzo with knight c3, maybe an anti-Nimzo, knight f3, and from there we could see a Queen's Indian or a Bogo Indian maybe. Could revert, of course, back to a Queen's Gambit declined. So knight f3 from Magnus. So again, we mentioned Bogo Indian, Queen's Gambit declined, all options. Pragg does go in for a Queen's Gambit decline now. Magnus responds knight c3. So, here bishop e7, and we're looking at a three knights variation in the Queen's Gambit declined, which is also very solid for black. Here we could also see a semi-Slav, could revert to a semi-Slav defense. Here, Pragg went for c5, and we get a semi-Teresh defense. Semi-Teresh, a couple different ways to pronounce that. So, what's the semi-Teresh all about? This is a very solid weapon for black. It's become more and more trendy. It used to be seen as maybe more of a lower tier option for black against the Queen's Indian, against the Queen's pawn, d4 openings. But it's come more and more fashion because black can get a very solid position from here. So the most common way to play this for white by far is c takes. Now, black doesn't want to go, if you go pawn takes here, all of a sudden you have this pawn to deal with, and you could see g3 from white, simply firing at this pawn. And this is going to be, it's already looking difficult for black. Black sometimes does go for this, but now we're not getting solid stuff. This is going to be a very dynamic game from here. So if c takes d, we usually get knight takes. And we see this in I think it's there's another line in the Queen's Gambit where the knight is taking right away after c takes d. I'm forgetting what the exact name that is for black. It's seen as a lower tier option for black, but either way, you immediately get the c4, and black, if you capture here, which is the most common move, b takes c. Now, because you already have this in, you can get this in immediately. C takes d4, and this is pretty solid for black after bishop e4 check, because you don't want to bring this knight, undeveloping this knight, now putting it on d2 and going into this pin. But if you just trade this off after you trade and castles, black generally has a fairly, a lot of drawing chances here, because black is very, very solid with the two pieces already off the board. White center gives white chances here, but black is very solid, very compact, can really play this solidly and has very strong drawing chances. So, Magnus, though, in response to Pragg's semi-terrace, Magnus goes e3. And we get a little bit different position here, again, as opposed to the c takes d line. But it's still, all the lines of the semi-terrace, like a reason that we see it more and more is that black can play this very solidly. And we see that immediately, where we get a very solid line from Pragg. He plays knight c6. So we have perfect symmetry here. And it's going to stay more or less symmetrical for some time, which speaks to the solidity of the position. So here, most common move a3. Again, you can just stay symmetrical here. Usually here we see d takes c5, bishop recaptures, b4 winning this tempo, bishop a7, and now developing this bishop. This kind of reminds you of, we see this in the semi-Slav on the black side, where you get this tempo on the bishop, and you've got the c. It would be c5 in for black, but so obviously white has chances here to attack black's center, but this is again still fairly solid. You've got this bishop out already. This is really your only problem piece to develop, and that's often common for black in these d-pawn openings. So we didn't see that, though. We see here, coming back, Magnus takes, and pawn takes, and so there's an opportunity here for white to saddle black with this IQP. So you could take this right away, and this would now be a thing. Bishop takes. Usually bishop e2 almost always played castles, a6, making a hole for this bishop. b3 developing bishop. The thing is, black has a good development here, and now we see that black is, with these pieces lined up, black can go ahead and trade this. So here we get you get knight a4, this bishop comes back, and now we're getting trades. You're hitting the rook, you're defending with the knight, and it goes on like that. It's a very drawish line that you can go into there. Very, very drawish. So we see that while it's attractive, perhaps, to saddle black with the IQP by immediately taking here, we see that, you're developing black with this move, and you're setting up for black to immediately get rid of this weakness, and then you're getting into a very equal position. So people usually don't play d takes c5 for that reason, and we don't see it here from Magnus. Here, Magnus plays bishop b5. So this pin introduces another element now into the position. So white is not saddling black with this, but white always has the option at some point to trade this off. And again, with the knight pinned, of course this pin can be resolved, will eventually castle, but for the time being there's no quick, if white were to take on the next move, with this knight still pinned, you're limiting black's options to get d4 in quickly and trade this pawn off. So with all that in mind, one of the most common ways to play, and what Pragg goes for, the most solid way to play, is simply taking here, and now there is no isolated pawn for black. So what do you capture with here? So let's look at knight captures. Bishop d7, just breaking the pin. Castles for white. Simply developing, getting ready to castle. And here, if you were to take here, b takes, winning the tempo on this bishop, you back up, castles, and black is totally fine here. These bishops are out. This bishop will take time. This pawn is, it's supported. Maybe eventually you get pressure on the c file, but black has absolutely no problems in this position. So after bishop d6, actually, we usually see knight f3, and again, this looks like a fine position for black, and it is. It's proven to be the case. So with all that in mind, Magnus goes, and again, we keep this symmetrical now. So the position is perfectly, we had this exchange, but now it's perfectly symmetrical, and white has played bishop b5. So if we got bishop b4, it would be perfectly symmetrical. And that is a move that's been played here. But instead of pinning this knight, which would immediately be broken, of course, with castles, Pragg goes bishop d6. And so now, controlling this diagonal, preventing bishop f4. So here, you might say, okay, maybe this pin is nice as well. Well, white has gone for this, and it's a line. Of course, this pawn's now under fire, so bishop e6 is the move. Castles, castles, rook e1, h6, bishop h4, rook c8, and yeah, knight e5 is a move here. It's the engine's recommendation. g5 is a move, not the best. Computer just recommends bishop b4 here. And yeah, now what are you doing as white? If you go rook c1, it's actually okay to play g5 here, because these pieces just, you're not getting a kingside attack in anytime soon. And knight e7, eventually white, or sorry, not knight e7, knight e7, just getting out of here. Now what are these pieces doing? These pieces, this knight is nicely entrenched, but white's position is not totally, you're suddenly not very coordinated, and you're certainly not gearing up for a kingside attack that's coming so quickly. So this position is a little better for white, but it's, white can go h4 here, but knight f5 is a nice response. takes, bishop h2, preserving the bishop, and knight e4, using this pin. This is a pretty nice position for black, all things considered. Very playable position. So, again, bringing it all the way back. This pin, playable. Instead, Magnus just castles here. And Pragg goes ahead and castles as well. So now what do we see? How about this pin now? Well, black's also threatening this pin. So we see h3 from Magnus. And, black now can go ahead and take time to avoid this pin, h6. Okay. So again, we now have, close to a symmetrical position. It's just these two bishops that have been placed on different squares. But especially with this pin broken now, it's a very balanced position. Computer gives this as dead equal, which makes total sense. So, all things considered, a nice result for Pragg out of the opening. At the same time, Magnus is playing a 16-year-old wunderkind, to use, I guess we'll say the German, if we're going to say it the German way, say it the German way, wunderkind. And I'm butchering that, apologies. So, yeah, why not go for a solid position that Magnus, of course, is very adept at simply grinding out. We notice that they reach this position very quickly. They absolutely fired these moves out. So, equal position, you got to be liking Magnus's chances to grind for some winning chances here in this, again, nearly symmetrical position. So logical move here, Magnus simply plays rook e1. And here you might be thinking, well, rook e8 makes sense. And it does make sense. It's not what we see from black here. And it's because, and this is the most popular move, Pragg goes for bishop f5 and simply uses the time that black has here. Again, black's not under pressure. If you can get this bishop out, we're not weakening. b7's not an issue. If you can get this bishop on this nice diagonal, again with a hole on h7 all ready to tuck it away, that's a nice move here. But we could get rook e1 is rook e8 is a move as well. So here, what do we play? Well, this bishop, how does white develop this bishop? That's kind of the next question to ask. Because again, in a position that's so equal, if white's going to fight for anything, you can't afford to not be aggressive with how you develop this bishop. You might be thinking, well, what about b3 and getting the bishop over here? Well, if you do that immediately, this is a huge problem now, and we have wonderful coordination. So, well, what about simply bishop here? This isn't very good for white. It's just not enough because rook c8 from black. What are you doing here now? What is this bishop doing? If you just retreat it and we trade, again, how is white getting ahead here? Now you can just go rook e8. And again, this position is nearly symmetrical. Where's the advantage for white? There isn't any. The computer says this is minus 0.1, so basically equal. And there's nothing for either side here. I mean, there's no way to claim an advantage. So you need to do better with this bishop. Here it's the same thing, only it's even, now it's even cluttering up. You can't bring this bishop back to oppose this bishop now, because you're no longer covering this square. So, what's white's strategy to develop this bishop? Well, here white goes knight e5. Knight e5, and so the idea here is now the bishop can come in behind the knight with this, now that the knight is disconnecting, this bishop from the f4 square. So that's a nice move from white, and it preserves some potential for dynamism in white's position. So I'm going to go ahead and let's take a look at, it's dead equal according to the computer. I'm going to pull up a game real quick. This is Vidit. This is Vidit versus Geary. And I'm just going to show you how a position like this, again, same moves, right? Often this position does fizzle out into a draw. And I just want to show you how that happens. So rook c8, defending the knight. Again, bringing the bishop in behind this knight is the whole point. Centralizing the rook here. And yeah, supporting the rook now on this e file. And again, white, this knight had nothing to do really other than trade itself off. But after bishop takes, you win the tempo here. And you're going to get this trade if white doesn't take it first. And we get more trades, and now again, there's just nothing left in this position at all. So here, this is actually a losing blunder, but there was nothing in the position. This is totally dead equal. This is a massive blunder from Geary. But white needed to play queen f3. Queen f3, you bring this back. Knight c5, hitting the queen. You have to keep this defended. You have to go here. Bishop a6. Very nice move. Very nice move. Bishop e4, queen f6. G takes. And f3. You can see how this could have been missed. I'm just briefly showing this. And this position is now totally winning for white after rook c3. Yeah, white is these pawn, it's in-game weaknesses now. White is going to be able to get in and just pressurize black's weaknesses. This is going to be a winning in-game. I'll just give you a couple more moves. You can just go rook b3 here, takes, knight takes, and white's weaknesses are going to be fatal. I just thought that was interesting. But that move was missed, and this is very drawish in the end. Yeah. I mean, black is just defending all of this. This bishop can just hold the pawn structure together. You're just defending with these pieces. So just thought that was worth checking out. That this is a very drawish position in many lines. But it's not going to be drawish for much longer here between Pragg and Magnus. So again, Pragg here, rook c8, just like in the Vidit-Geary game. Again, defending here. Bishop f4, again, that was the idea. This knight now blocks off that f4 square. Rook e8, again, solid, simply centralizing this rook. Rook c8, and again, this looks like the Vidit-Geary game, where simply nothing is happening here, and it's basically equal. This is very close to equal at this point. Queen b6 here. So again, lining up on the b pawn, inviting trades here. Black would love to see trades here because a couple of trades, and we're really getting into a drawish position along the lines of what we saw again in Vidit-Geary. Magnus does go ahead and trade this off, and now it is just, this position is just dead equal. How are you attacking? Again, there's always the potential for white. White can put a knight here. This bishop can potentially come defend this pawn. The rook is defending. Again, you move this knight and this trade is happening. There's a lot of possibility for this position to just simply fizzle into a draw very, very quickly here. So knight a4, attacking the queen. Knight potentially wants to post up here, where, again, it could be simply traded at some point, and you leave this pawn just sitting here as a pass pawn. This pawn would be defended, and again, there's really not much for white if that kind of trade happens. Okay, queen a6 now. So queen a6, the computer says this is a slight inaccuracy. Not too bad. But it does go into knight c5, with the possibility... So let's just look at that real quick. Knight c5, bishop takes. You might think, as I mentioned, d takes c5 and there's not much. Rook takes c5. The thing is you're giving up this. Queen a1, queen b3, you can take here. Rook takes, knight takes, and again, it's still nothing for white. If you take with the knight, you're pinning the knight. Computer wants to go knight e4. If you take here, rook a8, again, it's a problem. If you take with the queen, well, this is equal, but worse is queen c2 and hitting here. So just some little subtleties in the position with the tactics here. But again, black did walk into this. So basically here, bishop takes is the best option in going for lines like we just saw. It's not what Pragg goes for. Here, sorry, actually, Pragg, so Magnus didn't play that. Sorry, I was thinking Magnus had played the knight in. That was the best engine move. Magnus simply goes for this. And so you haven't hit the, again, it was maybe a little something for white with the knight coming in here. Now the computer says either knight move, here or here. Here, you're inviting this trade. And then if knight comes in, you can still take this. And again, we're defending so well here, and there's no weaknesses for white to exploit. You can also go here with the same idea. So Magnus plays rook e3, and again, there is nothing. This position is just dead equal, completely equal. So here, knight e4. Again, now we're covering this. So again, dead equal. The computer says the best option here is just to go in for this. And for the reasons we saw, this is totally dead, right? You can move the bishop. You can actually take here, and you're getting opposite color bishops, and there's no attack. Sometimes these middle games with opposite color bishops, with queens on the board, you actually get very, very aggressive attacking play, but that's not the case here. There's no weaknesses to exploit. The kings are too safe. Black can coordinate the defense. So, coming back, white, again, Magnus doesn't go for this, again, because we saw it was dead. White is fighting here. Magnus wants a little something in this position, and with that in mind, he plays f3. And so with f3, the idea is, if you go back here, well, for one thing, knight c5 again, and it's a little something. It's a little something. You take here, rook here, and it's just a very little something. Queen a2, knight takes c6. You could see that black could maybe stumble in this kind of position, but it's still not much. But that's not what Pragg goes here. Pragg actually, according to the computer, it's now minus 0.3. It's just a little something now for Pragg when he finds this move, knight g5. So what's knight g5 all about? Well, the computer here now wants to take this simply off. And so why is that? So what Magnus actually ultimately plays is rook e to c3, because his idea was to simply build up here. So what actually is the threat of this knight? This knight can come, see, the problem is the knight can now simply come here. And that's going to be a strong move for black, hitting this bishop now. And if you take here, rook takes c6, rook takes. Now this piece is undefended, but knight b5 takes, and this bishop is undefended. So hitting that bishop was very important. You have this knight sitting by itself, you have this rook by itself, and the lack of coordination here. This bishop is the queen might want to come here otherwise. Queen d2, and finally knight takes h3 check, and after takes here. So yeah, it's not good. If you might say, well, you just need to keep this defended. The issue here is the queen is coming in, and if you just simply defend like that, this, and you're hitting here. So a lot of nifty tactics in the position. And again, so this knight is coming here to threaten this pawn and hit the bishop. So you basically, if you're white here, taking is by far the best move. So Magnus didn't play that because, of course, by taking, you're basically conceding the edge to black, very clearly giving up this bishop. And this bishop is about to be a strong. We're going to have a minor piece imbalance, and it's going to be the knights versus the bishops, and it's Magnus Carlsen. He understands better than anyone that that's highly problematic if you're not in a very specific type of position where those knights are going to be better. So Magnus didn't play that. He plays, again, his idea is to pile up. So as we mentioned, knight e6 is a good move here. Pragg actually finds the computer's preferred move here, which is queen b7. So what's the deal with queen b7? Well, the idea is simply, because we can win here, right? Right, because the knight is still defending. Well, here, you're removing the defender, right? So that's the problem. You're removing the defender, and actually, you're pressurizing this knight, and maybe f3 is coming, and you're coming down this file. It's major problems. So, So queen b7, again, this bishop sitting here, it was always a precarious position to have this knight here and be shielding this bishop. But now, it's really a problem because you're not really attacking this pawn. This knight isn't free to simply come here without, losing this bishop. And again, white doesn't want to trade this bishop. So the queen's backing up. And you're getting out of, well, you're still getting hit by this knight move, with the knight coming here. So let's check this out. Again, you have bishop takes, and here, if you take here, again, the problem, this bishop undefended, now you're forking the rook. So here you have to take with a pawn. And here, again, they're just cool tactics in this position. This move, if you take, the knight is forking the king and bishop. And if you take the knight first, takes, and now this knight is hanging at the end. So we see that white has loose pieces here that can be exploited. So this queen, by virtue of moving here, again, you're threatening the b pawn. If this knight moves, you can also just come in. And again, we see lines in which this queen on the second rank could quickly be a huge problem for this king. If this knight moves, the rook and the queen I'm messing there. So the rook and the queen can be a huge problem. And again, this knight can always be taken. So here, Magnus simply backs up the bishop. And now this bishop is no longer a tactical liability. But the issue here for white is that Pragg has this move, knight e6. Knight e6, and this is still a problem for white. The bishop's no longer a tactical liability, but this knight is very well placed now. All of black's pieces are well placed. And this knight, if this knight moves, there's still tactical liabilities that could arrive. For one thing, you're able to trade this off with check, so this piece being undefended isn't a huge deal. Again, this knight very well placed, potentially ready to take here as needed, always pressurizing this pawn. So this position is getting better for black by the move, and the computer here is actually crying out, and the computer's giving minus 0.8 for black, and for white to even have that good of a position, Magnus needed to find g4 here. And this is not a human move whatsoever, because you're backing up, and what are you doing now? The computer here, it says now you take here. As mentioned, you're taking here with check. And g5, with this knight now eyeing up that f4 square, this looks terrible for white. And it's the computer gives it minus 1.0. But after here, queen a6, you're threatening here. This rook wants to come in, but white is essentially holding on here. You can get knight f4 in, rook e5, blocking this diagonal because we are coordinating on this square. Rook takes c3, rook takes c3, queen b7. Again, we're ominously eyeing up this pawn. And if you try and go passive, eventually now f6, and you're coming in. You're coming in, and white's king is a huge liability. So we see, sorry, I skipped a bit ahead there. We see the issues in this position. The ability for this, again, this knight, the rook, and the queen can all coordinate on this e7 square. So some of those tactics we just saw actually are relevant to the game continuation. So again, here Magnus didn't play g4, which as mentioned is not a very human move. Magnus actually does go for this capture, and this is immediately losing for white. And again, the issue is black can take here with check. This piece is no longer loose. King takes, knight f4. Again, as mentioned, we're coordinating on this square, and it's a huge problem because we recognize that as soon as we come in, we're hitting this pawn and it's pinned. Rook here, this pawn is pinned, and we're simply lining it up. So how does white actually stop that? The other problem is the rooks aren't coming to the 7th rank because we have this fantastic bishop that is dominating the c7 square, sorry, c2 square. So what do you do here for white? White's only move is to try and block this file from the rook. And, well, can this knight simply stay here? The answer, of course, is no, because we trade this rook off. Rook takes, and then this move, very nice move, simply f6. f6. And it's totally gone. You have to move this piece, or it's just game. You're just winning that piece. Rook e2, and there's no way to stop this. We can stop it for a move, but the problem is queen d7. Could also play queen f7. And now we're coordinating on this square as well. We're just eyeing up these pawns near white's king. And, if you move the king out of the way, yeah, And obviously you can't take that because white's mating. You can go g4 here to try and get out of it. Queen e8. Queen e8. Try and defend like this. And the knight's getting taken. And what else do you do? I mean, I don't even... Here, again, it's this. This is the problem. Takes. And the queen is now coming in. And that's checkmate shortly. So, again, bringing it all the way back. This is a blunder from Magnus taking here because, again, we can trade this off with check, and then this knight move is simply devastating, coordinating here, and there's just no way to stop it. Again, these rooks can't come to the 7th rank. It's complicated, and we're playing a rapid game. Pragg did not have a lot of time. Pragg saw this idea, but the problem is he plays knight f4 first. Knight f4 first. So why is this a problem? Why does black's idea not work? So now, knight takes. Okay, so we trade the rook off. This happens again. Now f6. Well, our knight is simply hanging. So white takes. And yeah, this is totally winning for white now. Tables have turned. If he tried to take that, it's rook e3 here. Pin. So yeah. So again, the problem for white was that the bishop was hanging on this square. Now black's knight is hanging on this square after the knight plays to disconnect this bishop. So interesting tactics on this diagonal in this game. It's really interesting position. So Pragg missed it, and Magnus did play knight e5. That was Magnus's move, knight e5. And now the advantage is gone for black. The computer gives this as minus 0.4. So as we can see that, there's still potential for coordination. This bishop is still good. So black's a little better here, but there's no onslaught that's imminent. So here, best was simply rook takes c3. Pragg went ahead and took here. And after d takes e5, best rook takes c3. Instead, now knight d3. And again, this knight is still looking dangerous. But here, Magnus sees that he can simply take. And after rook takes, yeah, here you could play rook c2, which looks terrifying. Not a very human move here, but there's no knight move to actually exploit this because you're always taking with check. You're always trading off with check. So yeah, but Magnus just goes ahead and takes, and this is totally equal now. So why is this position totally equal even though white's up a pawn? Well, the answer is simply that these pieces can come in on the white king, and white simply will have no time to shepherd these pawns down the board. If white, if the queen moves out of the way, comes over to the queen side, say tries to win a7, again, these three pieces are simply, they're going to be coming in on the king. And there's this pawn to worry about too. So again, even though white is up a pawn here, this position is totally dead equal. Also, note that if white isn't careful, there's actually already threats to the white king. So, say b3 here, and white simply wants to go a3, b4, and just sit back while marching these pawns. Well, here you could play queen d8, and, you might be thinking, well, there's no move that black can make here that white couldn't parry, so, we'll go on with a3. Well, now queen h4 is totally crushing because you're coming in on f2, and if queen f1, defending, Well, now queen d4 check, and this is just crushing for black. It's totally winning. So coming back after queen c8, Magnus plays bishop g3, and the idea is simply to get this king to a safe square on h2. So now d4 from Pragg, and again, this pawn is a source of counterplay. It's 3 squares away from queening. So again, it doesn't seem that white has a lot of time to take advantage of its extra pawn on the queen side. And yet we do see b3 from Magnus. And it illustrates that, Magnus might still see some life in this position. He's not willing to completely write this off yet. Maybe one day that this pawn's going to come all the way down the board. We're also defending the knight in the meantime. But yeah, for now, Magnus is content to pretty much wait here. Maybe watch, Pragg, 16-year-old, maybe watch Pragg crumble under the time pressure. But just queen c6 from Pragg. He did take a couple minutes. He's down on time now. But this king and this bishop, this knight, they're all kind of looming near the king. So again, is this queen brave enough to, say, come over here for the a7 pawn? Well, Magnus does play queen d2. And again, it seems like this queen is maybe ready to do something aggressive on the queen side. And we're left wondering, can black, get a counterattack that's actually dangerous to white in that time? Now, note here, in this position, Pragg can actually shut this queen's entire plan down, of wanting to come to a5. Pragg can actually just trade the queens here. And after this, one of these two pawns is simply falling. So Pragg had a chance here to completely kill off the position. But Pragg, even down time, even down on the clock, Pragg simply plays king h7. King h7, not, again, totally diffusing any tension left in the position. And I think this is really a very mature decision by Pragg. To say, I'm willing to just sit on this position too. Why not? My pieces are good here. Even though I basically have a draw in hand, and a simple draw, there's no reason just to sit, not to just sit on this position and watch what Magnus does, even though I'm down nearly 3 minutes on the clock. So I think it's a really mature, insightful decision from Pragg to just sit here. Now Magnus goes ahead and protects his king as well. And Pragg, again, is willing just to sit here. He simply plays bishop g6, defends this bishop, and simply asks Magnus, are you going to push this position? And Magnus says yes. He plays queen a5, the idea of taking here. So, you might immediately wonder, well, now the queen's just coming in, and isn't this a problem for white? And that's what Pragg played. He played the queen to c1. Now, let's go ahead and note this queen's retreat is totally cut off. All of these squares are covered by black. So it's a point of no return for the queen. Isn't that a problem? It's not a problem yet. Here, white can still take on a7, and it's what Magnus does. Note that for now, there's no way for this knight to approach. This knight and this queen aren't dangerous to the king yet. If we move here, this pawn is dropping. And now what are you doing? Now these pawns actually are going to be dangerous. You can attack here, but now the queen's coming back and we've won a pawn. So, and again, this bishop is also in a position just to take this knight. So here, again, with the pawn threatened, Pragg plays queen e3. And now these pieces really are looking dangerous to the king. But here, it's not too late for the queen to simply retreat. Now queen a5 is good, because to cover this square, the bishop's here, so if this knight moves, the queen can simply come back. And there's no way to threaten the king sufficiently without moving this knight. So white is just fine here. The knight's also blocking in this pawn from queening. So this is one way that white could have been just totally fine. But instead, Magnus had a different defensive idea in mind. After queen e3, Magnus plays a losing blunder in the form of knight c3. And again, we're taking advantage of this pin on the pawn. If takes, we're winning the queen. It's only temporary because we have c2 for black in this position. But now the bishop helps cover the square. So queen, we lose the queen. But in the end, white is now up 3 pawns. It's opposite color bishops, but it's 3 pawns, and this will be an easy win for white. So, knight c3, we can't take it, but whenever you put a piece on pre using a pin like this, of course, it's always completely fatal if the other side simply has a response that you have to deal with and not be able to get your piece to safety. And that is the exact problem here. Here, Pragg has the winning move, knight to f4. And you don't have time to get this knight anywhere. This knight is just hanging. If you take, we recapture with check, and we just win this knight. So, we're not taking. What was Magnus's idea? And he plays the move that was his idea. It's knight d1 here. Now note, if queen c1, for instance, and you give up d4, knight e2, again attacking here, queen d7 in this position, and you can attack the knight, e6, and here, you take bishop e5, and white again has its own attack. White just has its own attack, and now the black queen has to come back. So, but the queen has another move here, and this is the winning move. It's queen d2. And now it's totally gone. Magnus plays the best try here, and I'm not sure if Magnus still thought he was, if this is what he calculated, because knight f2, and this looks kind of cozy now. We're stopping this mate threat on g2. And, knight, good defensive piece, the knight. Well, the problem here is that we can threaten a very swift mate on white with simply knight e2. And the threat here now is simply for the queen to come in, and we're coordinating on g1. So, it's what Pragg played, knight e2 here, and it's just totally dead now. It's totally dead for white. Magnus plays the best try, in my opinion, just objectively. Objectively it's not. Subjectively, I think, to a human, this is the best try. And he plays h4, and it's just a run with the king. Not getting mated here. So, how does black proceed? Well, again, we just still simply threaten this mate. Here, there's really not much left for white to do to stop it. And also note that this bishop is prepared to, hit the king if it does run. So that's why we see queen d7 from Magnus. Again, just controlling this diagonal from the bishop. But this is the final blow in the game. And it's simply taking this bishop now. You can simply take this. If you take back, which is not what Magnus did because it's totally lost, this pawn that's been hanging in so many lines is now just totally gone. And if you go here, which is, nowhere else to go, if you blocked with the pawn, queen e3 check, knight's falling. And if you go here, as you just saw, it's this. So you can't take this knight. So here, Magnus simply takes the pawn, and at least he's defending this knight for now. But here, knight e2, this is the best move. It's simply threatening here and hitting the queen, and there's nothing to do. If you come here, you're just winning the knight, and it's game over. So, but Pragg played knight f1, and this works too. Magnus, again, was always planning on running here. This bishop check works as well if you get this. It's simply knight e3 here. And again, we're still threatening to come in on this queen. You have to take this knight. Yeah, king g3. And this is over. Yeah. I mean, you could win. You could, well, threaten to win. You can come over and defend. You could even just win a2 here, but there's better here. Just knight, actually queen e1 here is good. Can't take this because this is a nice mate. That's a really nice mate. So anyway, let's bring it back. After knight h3, or sorry, king h3, knight e3, and technically the best is h5, and you give up this knight. Of course, Magnus doesn't want to do that. He's trying to hold on and defend here. King g1 and threatening here is the easiest, but Pragg simply plays here, and you're just disconnecting the queen's protection from the knight. And here, Magnus resigned. Pragg was down to 45 seconds, and he found all of these moves. Really impressive sequence from Pragg. Cool as a cucumber in this low time situation. Again, here he had half the time of Magnus when Magnus played this knight to c3. And yeah, in just a minute, he found this crushing move. And was just totally winning there. So, that's the game. Pragg really, I think, again, even in a rapid game, but again, it's against Magnus, you know, that's a mentally very daunting task for anyone. He really showed a lot of poise and composure that I think suggests that we could be seeing something really special with him. I really expect a nice showing from Pragg in the candidates. You know, Ali Reza's first showing, and his candidates didn't go that well, and he had a lot of hype. I don't think Pragg will win this tournament. I'm definitely favoring Fabiano to win it, but I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Pragg have a good showing, and maybe in that next candidates, I could definitely see him winning it. I really think he has enormous potential. Will he be the next Magnus? Only time will tell. So yeah, really appreciate you watching. If you like this video, I'd really appreciate you clicking on the subscribe button. Helps grow the channel. So yeah, until the next one, you know, be well, get some rest. If things aren't going well for you in life right now, well, now you especially need some rest, because, you know, that's how you bounce back and take on the next day. So yeah, I hope things, though, are going well for you, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.